Hi, and welcome to the You World Order Showcase podcast, where we feature life, health, and transformational coaches, as well as spiritual entrepreneurs, stepping up to be the change they seek in the world. I'm your host, Jill Hart, the Coach's Alchemist, on a mission to help coaches and entrepreneurs amplify their voice and monetize their mission and get visible, leveraging podcasts and the huge network we have on the Gnostic TV platform. Today, we're chatting with James Burden, who is a speech language pathologist registered in British Columbia, Canada. He's most famous for his coaching service, helping professionals and entrepreneurs who stutter speak with conviction. Welcome to the show, James. It's really great to have you here.
Hi, Jill. Thanks for having me on the show.
Okay, I'm going to ask you the big question now. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay. What's the most significant thing, in your opinion, as individuals, we can do to make an impact on how the world is going?
When it comes to stuttering, the biggest impact that we can all make is to begin to realize that stuttering is completely normal. We want to understand that stuttering is part of the normal human spectrum of the way people speak. It's not a disease, it's not a disorder. It is what we now know as a neurodiversity, just like autism, ADHD, or being left-handed is my favorite one. And the more we begin to understand that, the easier it is for the people who stutter to be able to speak and occasionally make a mistake by stuttering. And I say that with a certain tone because I don't believe stuttering is a mistake. We all do it.
Yeah. And stumble over our words and have all kinds of communication problems.
Absolutely.
So how did you get started in this? This is kind of a, I don't run into very many speech therapists or speech
N-
stuttering coaches.
No, and I'm sure you don't. There's not a lot of speech therapists, and there's even fewer people, speech therapists, who work in stuttering as a focus. So you're not going to meet too many of us, I don't think. How I got into it when I was still in grad school. This was in 2008, so it was like 16 years ago. I was doing a practicum as part of my grad school, and I went and I worked with 10 people who stutter in an intensive group program. This is with Columbia Speech and Language Services in Vancouver. And I was just this student, but I got to witness 10 people go from stuttering rather intensely to completely fluent. But I don't want you to get caught up on fluency or speaking without stuttering because that's only part of the story.
So tell us the rest of the story.
All right, yeah, no problem. So the rest of the story is, so I got to watch this wonderful transformation, and I was absolutely moved by it. I changed my focus in my grad paper. And then I started after graduation. I started working with my mentor from grad school, Lisa Avery, and a couple other different mentors, Sandy Bohm, Wendy Duke, all from Vancouver, who are in the stuttering world, and I started to get their clients and I started to see big changes. I was like, I'm good at this. My clients were coming in stuttering and leaving out fluent. And later on, I had my own journey with, the old midlife crisis. And I'm like, I wanted to leave my job and start something new. So I started Stuttering Blueprint, and I was focusing on fluency like I'd always done. And then 2023 happened, and some of the biggest names in stuttering, like Barry Guitar, who wrote the textbook that I learned from in grad school, are now saying that stuttering is a neurodiversity. We always knew it was kind of normal part of the human spectrum, but I'd never heard that word applied to it before. And then I went and I talked to another one of my mentors. This was Kim Block, and she was the president of the BC Association of People Who Stutter. And she started telling me about the neurodiversity stuff and ableism, and how fluency approaches that ignore the underlying self-doubt, the underlying fear of stuttering, they miss the mark. And so I started to think, oh my gosh, I've been part of the problem. I'm teaching people how to be fluent when I should have been working on self-acceptance. And I went into a bit of a shame spiral myself. It's like, what am I even doing here? I've been doing the wrong thing all these years. I was helping people be fluent. And then, so I went and I checked in with some of my old clients, and it turns out they were able to hold on to their fluency for a while, but then after a while, they didn't keep up their practice, and the shame and the self-doubt started to creep back in, and they started going back to old avoidance behaviors. And then I knew I had to change something. So that's where the new Stuttering Blueprint came from.
Really interesting. I've heard a couple of things about stuttering that I'm going to run by you because I think it kind of ties in with this. One is that um, people who stutter are generally highly intelligent people, and they just have trouble getting their brain and their mouth to coordinate as quickly as they think. It's like they think so much faster than they can process the words to come out. Is there any validity to that, or is it just like old a rumor that I heard somewhere along the lines?
It's not a terrible way of thinking about it, and I certainly agree with you. Many of my clients are very intelligent. That's why there are professionals and entrepreneurs. We're not dealing with a population that is unable to do things. They're very, very capable, and they're out there doing it. Um, and what you don't realize with stuttering is that the majority of people who stutter are really adept at hiding it. We
Mhm.
call it covert stuttering. And they manage to pass as fluent, but it takes all of this mental effort. They're avoiding words, they're avoiding sounds, and the worst part is they're avoiding opportunities in speaking situations. So, they like, or picking a job where they don't have to communicate as much. Now, that's not true of everybody, of course, but it does take a lot of mental effort to be maintaining this fluency. And I call that like white-knuckle fluency. You're just like holding on for dear life and hoping you won't stutter. And, you know, when we use fluency techniques, that's great. And they do work to a degree, but if they're not based on a firm foundation of self-acceptance, they will fail in the long run.
I think that kind of goes across the board with any kind of trauma that we experience as human beings. If we don't get to the core of accepting that we are enough fundamentally, just because we're alive and we have something of value to contribute to the world, just by virtue of the fact that we're human beings and we're alive. Um, I, I think almost every kind of modality fails. And it's interesting that stuttering is like coming into this realm. It's like accepting people for who they are and valuing them for the contributions they're making, regardless of the way in which they make it or communicate it.
I
Does that
couldn't
make
agree
sense?
more. But more important than what everybody else thinks
Mhm,
is what's inside. What the
mhm,
people who stutter, or stutterers, whatever you like to be called, or you don't identify either way. Um, what matters is how you feel on the inside, because it's that sort of as within, so without, as above, so below kind of thing. If we are that, if we if you put the confidence first, in the past, it's like, oh, if I don't stutter, then I'll be confident. But it's kind of the other way around. If I
mhm.
have self-assurance, then I will stutter less, or when I do stutter, it just won't matter so much.
that was the other thing that I'd heard is that people who stutter tend to stutter more when they're under pressure. And it doesn't have to be external pressure, it can be internal pressure that they're putting on themselves. And the more stressed they are, the more they struggle with being fluent. To use your vernacular.
Absolutely. And this is true of everybody. Again, it's on a spectrum, right? So I
Mhm,
stutter when I'm under pressure. I don't identify as a person who stutters. I identify as an ally. But
mhm,
when I'm under pressure, I stutter. And that's also true of people who stutter. And that's where a lot of these misconceptions come from, that people who stutter are nervous or anxious or they're not skilled, is because when neurotypical people stutter, that's how they're feeling. You know, they only stutter under those circumstances. But people who stutter can stutter when they are confident because of the neurological difference.
mhm. I think it's more biological than just something that you can fix. I-
Oh,
it
yeah.
like
I love that you use the word fix because that is not what I'm about. I'm not about
right.
fixing something that's not broken. It's much more about like feeling in confident in yourself. And then, yes, of course, we can work on the speech, but that is the surface level. That's the tip of the iceberg. That's not what's underneath. That's not the big deal.
Is that so when it comes to why speech therapy fails to work for people who stutter, this is how are you different than the
Um,
typical way that it's approached?
Typically, in the past, we'd be looking at it through a medical model. It's something that's wrong, and we're going to fix it. And I talked about the iceberg a minute ago.
Mhm.
If we are chipping away at the top of the iceberg, which is the speech and what you and the avoidant and those things, then you can chip away at it, but then the bottom of the iceberg is just going to raise the whole thing back up again. My approach using things like acceptance commitment therapy, avoidance reduction, those those kinds of under the iceberg approaches. We're taking that iceberg, we're taking it to warmer water, and we're melting the bottom. And that's going to reduce the stuttering, but more importantly, it's going to put people in a position that they're not going to get thrown off when they stutter. And I think that's actually more important because if we all stutter, then sooner or later, someone's going to stutter. And if that throws them off, then it's kind of game over for that conversation.
I love that we live in a world now that we're not totally there. We're moving in this direction, though, where people can just own who they are. And if they have interesting, different speech patterns, they can own their different speech patterns. There are people that are really famous in the world who have different sorts of speech patterns. And stuttering is just a speech pattern, really. It's a way that you're articulating what you're trying to get across to people. But and I can never remember this guy's name, but he was a comedian from the 60s, and he had a really different speech pattern. The way he talked sounded unique. And people who stutter but are confident in who they are and own their speech pattern have the ability to just let it be part of who they are and not try to run away from it. Does that make sense to you?
That makes perfect sense to me, and it reminds me of this man who came in and I'm not going to use his name. This was part of my speech therapy practice, but he came
Mhm.
in with his son, and he was very worried about his son beginning to stutter, but he wasn't worried at all about his own, and he had a very intense stutter, every couple of words. And when I stutter like that, just to put that out, that I want to normalize it. I want people to hear stuttering because it's it's something that just happens. But he came in and he was doing that. He was like having the big, big stutters like this. And he owned it. He didn't care. He about himself, he was totally comfortable with himself. And that was like a very early tip off for me that there is maybe something wrong with my earlier approaches.
I wonder if maybe his son wasn't emulating his father just because that that was the way his father spoke. So he thought that's the way, somebody I admire speaks. I'm going to be like that also. And another point that I have is that stuttering allows the listener opportunities to absorb what's being said. If you listen with intensity, it causes people to actually have to lean in and hear what you're saying. It actually can be an asset used
Absolutely.
correctly.
In fact, I was just on a group call in a stuttering kind of get together online, and the man who was speaking, and I'm forgotten his name right now, I apologize, but he was a salesman or is a salesman. And he was saying that when he divulges his stutter, when he tells people that he stutters before, what, just as the meeting is starting, and he doesn't apologize. He doesn't say, I'm sorry I stutter. Thanks for listening to me. He says, I stutter. This is just how I talk. And he just owns it. He says that when he has divulged something like that, something that people usually hide, it kind of goes to show that he has nothing to hide. And that makes what he says in a sales call all the more powerful. If this guy's got nothing to hide, then he's probably not hiding anything about his product either.
I I love it. You know, I think it's so important that we normalize a lot of these differences instead of forcing everybody to be in these little boxes that are artificial to begin with. I think starts with schooling and making everybody, we're all going to be the same and we're all going to stand in line just like this. And we're going to tell you exactly what the teacher said. We're just going to repeat it back to you in the same cadence, in the same way, and without any emotion. Because God forbid we be individuals and we be unique and we share how different we are. And in that way, we can learn to accept the magnificence of the differences that we all exhibit in life.
And that's why this is the time for this kind of approach. You know, a
Yeah.
lot of different things are becoming more accepted. I mean, yes, we're going back on it in some ways, but I think the general trend is towards more acceptance. So this is the time for a stuttering approach that is about self-acceptance. Um, I think that still working on stuttering is okay. It's okay to stutter. It's okay to change how you speak, how you present yourself, how anybody presents themselves is their own choice.
Yeah.
It's not up to me to say the way they decide to do that.
It gives them back their power. They're no longer the victim of circumstances. They are the hero of their own journey. And someday I'm going to write a book. It's called Be Your Own Damn Hero. You know, own who you are, own all
I
your
like that title.
foibles, own your trauma, own your triumphs. Because it's only through grabbing hold and accepting who we are fundamentally can we really be that beacon of light that we're here to be.
And it's only going through those struggles, that hero's journey, that makes it possible to grow. You kind of have to go through that. And I've been through that myself. I went through a divorce. I had a brain tumor that got operated on in April. I gave up my original career and started to do Stuttering Blueprint a couple of years ago. And all of these things, there's been trials and tribulations along the way. And if I hadn't had that experience, I don't think I'd be in a position to help other people the way I am now.
Yeah. It all comes full circle. And it has created the humans that we are in the moment and will continue to create and evolve us into the future. So when it comes to actually coaching people, you do this online, correct?
Yes, I do it online.
And in groups.
There's an individual component and a
Mhm.
group component. I like to start with the individual component because a lot of people aren't quite ready to sit down in a room with a lot of other people who stutter. In fact, they've been hiding it so long, the thought of actually meeting other people who stutter is intimidating. You know, what if it triggers me to stutter more or some those kinds of thoughts come up. So I start individually, and so I can get to know my clients individually. And then when people are ready, we transition into the group. But I do think that the group is absolutely necessary because it's that normalization. Once you feel comfortable to hear other people stuttering and it doesn't sound so terrible from somebody else, but we judge ourselves so much more. When you see other people stutter, it's like, oh, maybe I could let the odd one out, and I'm not going to be judged. Maybe I'm not going to be judged anywhere near as much as I thought I was.
Yeah, I love that. So where do people start with getting working with you? And I'm just going to put this out here so I don't forget. If you're listening to this episode and you don't personally stutter, if you know someone who does, please share this with them because just knowing that there are others out there like you is hugely helpful in helping people not feel so isolated and alone in their in their in their differences, but we're all different, sort of similar ways. So
And sorry to interrupt you. You
no,
might not even know necessarily. People are so good at hiding it. But I just want to share this one statistic with you because it's an important one. 1% of the world stutters. That's,
a
there's
lot of people.
variation within that on how severe they are, how intense their stutter is. And I'd say the majority of those people can hide it. But because everyone who is stuttering is hiding it for the most part, it appears like I'm the only one or you're the only one that stutters. But there's so many people, 3 million in the US alone and 80 million people worldwide. That's a lot of people.
Yeah, that's a lot of people. So back to my original question before I got distracted. Um, how do people get started with you? Do they take your free online masterclass?
That's a great way to start. It'll give you a bit of an idea of my approach. And then from there, book a call with me. The first call is free because I don't want people who stutter to be thinking like, okay, I have to pay money to even talk to this guy. Just come have a chat with me. It's not a pressure situation. It's just like, is this the right time for you? Are you, what's your personal why? Why is this important to you? If now is not the time, I'm not gonna put pressure on you because why? It's not gonna work anyway. It's a very delicate, time-based, readiness-based thing is working on your stutter. And if I did put pressure on someone, it would just backfire.
Right. Back to the more pressure, internal pressure we have
Right,
about
exactly.
it's like, yeah, that's not going to work. Um, So then the name of your online class is this three-step system that helps professionals and entrepreneurs who stutter to speak with conviction so they can confidently stand out in meetings, impress clients, and go after their goal without constantly worrying about their speech. And I love that because it's really targeted at professionals who need to be able to communicate in group settings or even one-on-one. I loved your story about the gentleman that was the salesperson. That's a really powerful testimonial about how you can embrace your neurodiversity and live a rich, full life and really help other people in the process.
Yeah, I thank you for sharing the name of the course, or the masterclass, I should say. It's not a full course. It's it's aimed at professionals and entrepreneurs because those people already have skin in the game. They're already using their voice to some degree, and maybe they're holding themselves back from that next level. And also to be able to do it without this constant nagging self-doubt. I think it's more about releasing that so that you can go after your goals than it is aiming at perfect speech.
Yeah. It can put speech back where it belongs. It's just that thing we do rather than the thing we think about doing all the time. Thanks so much for joining us today, James. To learn
Thank
more
you for
about
having me.
to learn more about James and to get access to his free online workshop, please visit stutteringblueprint.com/register. And we'll be sure to put that link in the show notes. Thank you for joining us today. And if you have a podcast or are interested in starting one to get your message in front of our huge and active audience, be sure to check or reach out to us at support@heartlifecoach.com. We love to help spiritual entrepreneurs and coaches amplify their voice and monetize their mission, and offer a variety of ways to do this on the Gnostic TV network platform. Join us for our next episode as we share what others are doing to raise the global frequency. And remember, change begins with you. You have all the power to change the world. Start today and get visible.